I thought I'd bring to you a more recent claim, definitely with some more recent crimes, more recent names. And this back in 2012, this was sent to me as a suggested Scientology Crimes. And basically, a Burbank home daycare is the center of a criminal investigation amid accusations that a 14-year-old molested a 4-year-old child. Burbank police interviewed children, parents, and owners of the daycare. Investigators say it appears to be an isolated allegation. Michelle Vallis reports from Burbank for the NBC4 News at 5, November 7th, 2012. Well, it goes from there to, let me pull up, I was sent one of the Tony Ortega underground bunker. Let me get rid of that and add this one. It's kind of interesting how this all flows from one person to the next. And this is courtesy of the underground bunker. He does an excellent job. As I said, why reinvent the wheel? Credit to him, to Tony Ortega, on his excellent reporting on this. I'm going to go ahead and read it. Back in 2015, when we first wrote about him, there hadn't been court testimony about Julian Swartz and his deeds as an enforcer for David Miscavige. That would come years later at the trial of Danny Masterson, and like the rest of the people sitting in the court during the second trial, we were stunned to see a photo of Swartz posted on the screen in the courtroom, the same photo that Leah Remini and Yashir Ali posted to Substack this weekend. Swartz was the subject of testimony in the Masterson trial because he was one of the several Scientology ethics officers who had been telling the Jane Doe victims that they wouldn't and couldn't use the word rape, and that they would be punished for turning Masterson in. It was great to finally get a face to go along with the name, but we didn't have cameras in the courtroom, of course. We were glad to see Leah and Yashar get the photo out to the world, and in the piece they wrote to go along with it. One of the cases they said Swartz is known for is the daycare from hell that we wrote about 8 years ago in 2015. We thought it might be a good idea to post that story again since it's been so long and since Julian is back in the news. Back in 2015, they wrote a story called Scientology's Daycare from Hell, the scandal the church managed to keep hidden until now. This is going to be really interesting, guys. We're going to go a little bit all over the place on this. We're going to find out who this lady is, and then we're going to find a video lately of this lady. So this is going to come all the way to today. This is written by Tony Ortega, illustrations by Chad Esley, originally published July 10th, 2015. Ellen was driving back from an outing in San Diego with her daughter when she got the call. Ellen is not her real name, but this account is exactly how she told it to us. It was Julian, an ethics officer at Scientology's org in Los Angeles. Julian was one of the young Master-at-Arms, the MA, who enforce Scientology's myriad rules and regulations. If you heard from him, it usually meant you were in some kind of trouble. Ellen knew. I need to see you right away, he told her. No, tell me what it is now, Ellen answered. If she was in trouble, she wanted to know right away. I can't really get into it. You're going to be getting a call from a police detective. LAPD? Ellen frowned. Why would Scientology's ethics officer be telling her that she would be getting a call from the police? Why is a detective going to call? She asked. You're probably also going to be getting a call from, Julian said, and then he named a woman we're going to refer as daycare mom. Something happened there, Julian continued. Ellen could do the math. She looked at her daughter, who was just 7, and she seemed all right. Ellen tried not to show how much she wanted to scream. It had been 2 years since Ellen stopped sending her daughter to daycare mom's house, where she operated a business that catered to other Scientology families. Ellen had a bad feeling about the place then, and now her worst fears were coming true. After she got home, she dropped off her daughter and drove to the org. She went to Julian's office and asked him what was going on. Julian asked her to wait, and he brought in daycare mom. He also brought in a Scientology chaplain, a man in a suit, who was introduced as an attorney for the church. Daycare mom then began speaking. My son was molesting the girls at the daycare for over a year. Your daughter was one of them. We're just coming clean about it. But that daycare information was from 2012. So all of this math isn't mathing. Ellen sat stunned at daycare mom then went into a Scientology practice of giving time, place, form, and event, and methodically described what her son had done to each of the girls and how many times. Why would she know? That was hard to hear, Ellen says. Julian then explained that daycare mom had revealed the crime during a sec check. A sec check or security check is a brutal interrogation that all Scientologists must go through from time to time. The subject of a sec check is asked to hold the sensors of the e-meter, the crude electronic device, with their utter confidence in the e-meter's ability to tell when they're holding back information. Scientologists spill their guts until the tough questioning of the ethics officer. In this case, daycare mom had spent tens of thousands of dollars to go through something called OT eligibility in preparation for starting the vaunted operating Thetan Scientology levels. As Claire Headley explained to us during our survey of Scientology courses up the bridge, a member isn't allowed to start OT levels, which themselves cost many thousands of dollars each, until passing OT preps and OT eligibility, which includes a sec check. Scientologists can't begin the high-leveled courses, Claire explained, without first going through an intense interrogation to find out if they have evil intentions. During her sec check, convinced she couldn't defeat the all-knowing e-meter, daycare mom had revealed the information she had been holding back, that her teenage son was a predator, and for more than a year he had molested the girls other parents dropped off at her house. Julian told Ellen that as soon as he heard about the confession, he told daycare mom that it was her responsibility to call the police. I told you, you're either going to report the crime or I will, Julian claimed. But even though the crime had been reported, Ellen was told that the mothers were being asked to keep the matter within the church. Ellen was told obstructing justice. Ellen was told that if the daycare son were charged he was 17 and still a juvenile, he'd be subject to psychiatric treatment and medication. We're begging you not to press charges because he'll be the subject to psych evals. We want to avoid that, the attorney said to her. It's funny, there's a chaplain and an attorney telling the moms what to do, impeding an investigation. Scientologists are taught to regard psychiatry and its medications with the white-hot hate. The thought of daycare mom's son on the psych drugs in custody was worse to these Scientologists than doing nothing about a young man who had molested their daughters. Julian was very clever in the ways he did this. He did make sure it was reported to the police, but then he turned it over to the chaplain like it was a church situation. It was clear that he was the one making sure none of us filed charges or filed lawsuits. I told him there was no way in hell I was going to allow that. After the meeting, Ellen did hear from the police detective, who called her last out of all the parents involved. Ellen's daughter had been at the daycare the least and hadn't been victimized as much as some of the others. The problem, detective told her, was that none of the other parents wanted to press charges. I didn't know that you had to not press charges. I thought that was up to the state when it's a criminal investigation? Just thoughts. Ellen called each of them and told her it was against Scientology rules to prosecute a fellow Scientologist, not without permission from the International Justice Chief, a man named Mike Ellis, who members almost never saw or heard from. The mothers were concerned that if they pressed charges, they would lose their own OT levels, Ellen says. What she means is that when the mothers, like daycare mom, also reach their OT eligibility, in order to go into the high-level courses, they would also be integrated. And if they had sued or prosecuted a fellow Scientologist, they'd lose the right to spend tens of thousands of dollars per level to reach the top of Scientology's spiritual attainment. Ellen was infuriated. She said she didn't need anyone's permission to press charges, but the other mothers didn't budge. Each of them and Ellen had been instructed by Julian how to talk to the police detective to convince them that daycare's son should not be prosecuted. But Ellen didn't go along with it. She not only helped the detective with his investigation, she personally rounded up the 4 other mothers and took them to meet with the prosecutor at the district attorney's office. Was that Gascon back then? Was he still in there? Or was that the lady before Gascon? I actually got the other mothers to the DA's office and got the kids interviewed by the police detective using the doll. But the mothers decided to let the church handle it, she says. With the limited cooperation they received, the DA's office charged the young man with a crime that only resulted in a sentence of probation. I at least wanted him on the sex offenders list, but we didn't even get that, Ellen says. Ellen was so disgusted with how the affair had been handled, she decided to leave Scientology. After having grown up in the rather prominent church family, she is a third generational Scientologist, and we'll get into that here in a minute. Once she did, her parents, who remained in the church, cut off all contact with her as they followed the Scientology policy of disconnection. Ellen shared with us a lengthy document she wrote to her father explaining reasons for leaving Scientology. We're not going to get into all of this. It's very sad when the man only had the young child, I should say, he wasn't a man, he was only 17, only had to do a liability formula. And when Scientologists are considered to have committed a transgression of some kind, they can be assigned a lower condition to reflect their lack of status. Liability is one of the least severe lower conditions. And making up for it requires an involved program of contrition, including asking permission of others to rejoin the non-liable population. Daycare's son had reportedly spent time in their homes of the victims so he could accomplish this program, Ellen told her father. When she found out about it, she was shocked. I thought surely the church was going to declare them all. Referring to Scientology's practice of excommunicating members, declaring them suppressive persons. But the mom is still in the church, and so is the kid. They let them do conditions to make up for the crime. They even let him babysit. That's when I never went back, Ellen said with disgust. Wait, but there's more. One of Ellen's friends had also recently left the church, and at one point, Ellen was asked by her friend why she left the organization. The friend was livid. The friend knew a major Scientology celebrity who had been having some doubts and who became irate upon learning what had happened at the daycare. The two of them got busy gathering information about the case. Each of them told Ellen that if she went public, they would pay for her to have an attorney and other expenses incurred. They pressed the reporters to do a story. Scientology wanted to keep it quiet, wanted it kept in-house, and they were successful. Several years later, the friend and the Scientology celebrity are still fuming that the church was able to keep a lid on the incident and that daycare mom and her son were still active members. The son is now in his mid-20s. This was back in 2015. So he's almost probably 30 now. They're still in the church. And at that point, Ellen, again, that's her go-by name, was more concerned about her daughter because her daughter was a teenager now and she didn't really remember it. So unfortunately, this story is all too typical. It is not by far the only instance of SA of children in Scientology that has not previously seen the light of day, says former Scientologist spokesman Mike Rinder, who knows Alan well and is familiar with the underlying facts in the case. While Julian played on the fear of psychiatry, this isn't always a factor in these cases. But there are two fears that are always overriding concerns. One, the terror of negative press and bad PR that such circumstances would generate. And two, the hatred and fear instilled into all Scientologies of WOG justice, of the Justice Department, of the Police Department. The hatred and fear instilled into them. The only reason these people are not declared is the fear the church has that it might somehow prompt the perpetrators to come clean and spill the beans about how it was covered up by the church. After all, if there is any application of Scientology SP and disconnection tech that would ever be applicable, it is for a child sex abuser. Scientology routinely offers up the example of an abusive spouse to justify application of SP disconnection tech. The implied message is that even a moron would understand that you should disconnect from such a person and they should be made known to warn others. Yet here we are, another example where the SP declare and disconnection policy should be used and it is ignored. Meanwhile, Scientology forced Ellen's parents to disconnect from her because the crime of no longer choosing to call yourself a Scientologist is so much worse than molesting children. That's just absolutely asinine and amazing. And a little bit of a tease, tomorrow Ellen updates us on surprising new twist in the story. And we're going to go to that because I have that prompted. And we're going to share screen. And I'm going to cancel and pause while I find it. Aha, I knew I found it. It was in there. It was just hiding. So this is the next day with Julian Swartz in the news again. We checked in with Ellen this weekend. She told us she had some updates to the story, but she also said she'd come to a big decision. It was about time that she identified herself and put her name on the daycare story. Woohoo, we find out. She is Trish Conley, a close friend of Leah Remini. Trish is a former third-generation Scientologist. Her Melbourne maternal grandparents worked directly with L. Ron Hubbard at St. Hill, and her parents, Jim and Kay Conley, were LRH PERS Pro, Sea Org members who worked on burnishing L. Ron Hubbard's image. They were and remain extremely dedicated Scientologists. Kay's sister Sherry, meanwhile, is the mother of Kate Ceberano. That makes Trish first cousins with probably the most famous Scientologist in Australia, where Ceberano is a well-known singer. Trish herself joined the Sea Org at 9 years old. She signed her billionaire contract at 9 years old, and she says ever since then, she had wanted one thing more than any other, to reunite her family, which Scientology had assigned to different areas. Joining the Sea Org broke my family apart. Beautiful picture, beautiful, beautiful picture of a family. By 11, Trish was cleaning the rooms where David and Shelley Miscavige were living. It was also around that time that Trish's mother, Kay, blew, Scientology jargon for escaping. I will put a link down to this last summer, beginning of their spring. Aaron and Trish Conley Walker did an interview, and she had talked a little bit more in depth about some of this time frame. I won't give it all away. I'm going to put a link there. It's a little over 2 hours, and I certainly don't want to get copyright strike, but they did a fabulous interview. She's a wonderful lady, and she talks about during this time she ended up going to the rehabilitation force because her mother blew, and how the RPF was just incredible. So the RPF is the Sea Org's version of the prison detail, and Kay was assigned to sleep in a parking garage on the south side of Fountain Avenue, across the street from Scientology's Los Angeles headquarters, which is the old hospital, the Cedars of Lebanon. Joining her in the parking garage was Trish, who also went to the RPF to stay near her mother. So the two of them were in the RPF together. 3 years later, when she was 14, Trish was out of the Sea Org, and she became increasingly difficult for her parents to handle. She ended up at the notorious Mace Kingsley Ranch in Palmdale, California, where many former Scientologist children have reported hellish conditions and discipline. It was closed years ago. She also states she was gone for a while. She went to Australia to live with an aunt and I believe her grandmother. And then she ended up coming back and being sent back to Mace Kingsley when she was 18. That's, as I said, another story that she's talking about in Aaron's Growing Up in Scientology's video, which is an excellent video. In her 20s, Trish rededicated herself to moving up the bridge and eventually reaching operating OT level 4. OT, of course, is OT 8 is the top course. Eventually started to become disillusioned. Part of that was when she went to Flag, the Scientology spiritual mecca in Clearwater. And that's about a year later is when she received the call from Julian telling her to come down for a briefing about the daycare. And that's the whole article that we just went through. Her sister Liz, speaking to us from Australia, says the moment is still as vivid for her as it is for Trish. It's still enough to make my body shake. It's so powerful. That moment of seeing Trish so broken on the floor at her house. I don't think I've ever seen her like that. She's a very strong and outgoing. To see her crumble like that, it was like nothing I'd ever seen. Liz explains that even today she is filled with emotion thinking about it, and she thinks it's because it brings up for her an incident she went through at 19 with a Scientology celebrity. It was a date rape, essentially, and I got put into ethics for it and had to write up my overts. That's why this whole thing with Danny Masterson and what those women are saying has meant so much to me, because it absolutely does happen. We're just discovering a whole bunch of Scientology crimes in here, you guys. Liz was watching her sister try to come to grips with what Julian Swartz was telling her, that incidents of child molestation at a Scientology daycare would be made to go away by refusing to press charges. For Trish, that bizarre incident was connected to so many other things happening for her at the time, pushing her away from Scientology. But the final push she remembers, came from David Miscavige. In 2007, announced that he had produced the new versions of the L. Ron Hubbard, blah, blah, blah. We're not going to go through that. How much it cost? It was $3,000 per set. Her dad had wrote her a letter and told her that she needed to buy a set for herself, a set for her young daughter, a set for her then husband, and 2 more sets to donate to libraries. She refused, and she was embarrassed for her father. Meanwhile, Trish's parents were also becoming concerned because of the company she was keeping, namely ex-Scientologists. Mike Rinder tells us he was close to Trish from many years before. It was Trish who found that Rinder's then 8-year-old daughter, Taryn, had been seriously injured by a hit-and-run driver near Scientology's Los Angeles headquarters. Trish visited the girl in the hospital every day, and Rinder says he credits Trish with saving his daughter's life. After Rinder left Scientology in 2007, his former wife and children, including Taryn, disconnected from him. We all know that story. Despite pressures from her parents, Trish refused to give up her friendships with Rinder or the others. In 2013, Trish's parents flew from Australia to visit her in Los Angeles, and they spent more time arguing with her about being in contact with the wrong people than sightseeing. When Trish refused to break off contact with her friends, Chrissy Waitman, another ex-Scientologist, her parents sent her formal messages announcing that they were cutting her out of their lives. Wow, I'm sorry. I am so sorry. It was about a year after that when we talked to Trish for our story about the daycare from hell. Trish's daughter was one of the girls affected, but less so than others. The 17-year-old boy admitted that he was about to take the 3-year-old girl's diaper down when Trish arrived to take her daughter. I didn't put my name on the daycare story because my daughter never knew about it, and she's grown up to be pretty internet savvy, Trish said. In the meantime, while she kept her name under wraps in regards of defying Julian Swartz and her attempt to get the 17-year-old boy prosecuted, Trish was still dealing with her parents and the involvement in Scientology. Over the years, they kept in touch, even though she was declared, in the hopes that they could somehow reunite their family. Last year, Trish even flew to Australia to see her parents, hoping to figure things out. When I flew to Australia in May 2022, it was on the download. Kate wasn't allowed to know. My dad set me up in a room in his place. He was really excited, but if the phone rang and it was Kate, I would have to sit outside and be really quiet. They didn't want Kate to know I was there. At one point during the visit, her father began showing her boxes with old letters in them. They were from his mother, who was not a Scientologist. We're really worried with what you're doing with Trisha. You've run off to this weird cult and she's not getting educated. And stapled to each letter was a response from him, handling her originations. Why, we asked, would her father be showing her these letters? They were to convince me. Look, I've always loved you. Look at these letters. I saved you. But I read them and thought, what? She was stunned to see how much her father had defended the church against his parents' attempts to find out what really was going on. After that, I changed my flight and I went home early. And after all these years, he was still saying he wanted me to do my A&E. If you handle it, we can be a family, he said, and with no regard for the reality of it. Talks about what the A&E is, doing their amends. She said, okay, Dad, I will try. Let's talk about it. But you have to do something for me. She said he needed to watch every episode of the Leah Remini Scientology in the Aftermath and the HBO documentary Going Clear. He did. But even after seeing all of Scientology controversies laid bare, He still insisted that Trish do her A&E to reunite the family. Yeah, they were really pissed off, she says. They told him he had to fly Kate up to the AO and confess it to her. And he did. That's bananas. There's a picture of Kate Cabrano, Tom Cruise. She doesn't want to give up that relationship. Amazing. But it's okay. For the first time, I'm 50 years old. For the first time in my life, I'm okay with it. I'm finally accepted that they will never change, and it's okay. She realizes it would have been hard for her parents to turn their backs on what they've known for 45 years. They're not going to do it, she says. A few months ago, her father told her again that she needed to do her A&E. That was your answer. I can't right now. And I hung up, she says. At that point, she and her sister Liz decided to write their parents a letter in effect that they had decided to disconnect from their Scientologist parents. Sometimes setting those boundaries is the only way to go. She did talk to her daughter finally after Liz, her sister, thought that she had told her. She didn't. Her and her daughter talked about it. So they came clean. They ended up crying with one another. Trish says her daughter was stunned that she never said anything about it, but she was proud of her mom for trying to do what she did. There's some love in that family, you know it? True love, true forgiveness. We're all good now. We cut our parents out, which is sad, but boundaries. We want to put our names on things. Liz and I are speaking out now about what we've been through, and we're super tight with my daughter, who is an amazing person. She is in the 4th year of her college. That's so awesome. Beautiful pictures. Beautiful story. Oh, we are going to stop that. Let me load up this other presentation. I want to show you, I'm not going to, as I said, go through the whole thing because I don't have his permission, 1, and 2, it's really important that you go and watch it. We're going to have to get through the thing here.
And all the,
I'll
dancing
play a
motions that
short
go
clip.
along with that, and the threat of being declared if you do it.
And Trish, can you correct me on this if I'm wrong? So, because someone's going to say, well, in a criminal matter, it doesn't matter if the parents sue. My understanding is that the matter itself was reported to the police.
Yeah.
But all the parents were told not to cooperate and say they're not trying to press charges.
Yes.
And basically, even though it was reported to the police, no one cooperated because they were told not to. And that's why I say it was reported just to get the case filed while the kid was still underage, and it would all be sealed up and it would all very easily go away.
Exactly. Yeah. You nailed it. That's what happened. Yep.
And there's at one point here, versions of this story have been told over the last number of years, and Lisa Marie Presley's name has been brought up in relation to this story. Where does her involvement in any of this come into play?
So when I told Leah the story, Remini, I told her about it, and she had been talking to Lisa and told Lisa about it. And Lisa was so upset by it that she apparently went to Flag, confronted David Miscavige, and his sister was there, and asked him about this, and they just denied everything, said nothing happened. And she just, apparently, this is what I've heard, wasn't there, but this is what I heard, that just set her off. And she ended up leaving Flag and called me and said, if I can get you a lawyer, would you still want to move forward in prosecuting this guy? Because this makes me sick. And I said, well, I'll talk to her lawyer for sure. I don't know what can be done now. It's been many, many years later. And I'm the only one. There was one other mother that I heard was ready to come on board at that time, actually. Some time had passed. And so she paid for my lawyer. She paid for me to talk to a lawyer. And after I got done with him, unfortunately, he, the statute of limitations had expired. The fact that the kid was a minor was a problem. And so nothing could happen anyway.
Okay, I'm going to stop it there. As I said, a wonderful, wonderful interview. Please go back. I'm going to link it down below in the description. Please go back and watch this between Aaron and Tricia Walker. A beautiful, beautiful interview. But with this, when I heard that, my ears perked up because we just got the reprieve on the statute of limitations, and her daughter is obviously under 40 and still has the opportunity to file. And so I've sent this to Miriam, the question to Miriam. I've sent the question to Aaron over at Growing Up in Scientology. If they could get this video to her, to Trish Conley Walker, to have her daughter, she could refile. And I know in that video that I had done, there is a law office called Herman Law that's ready, willing, and able to take any one of them on. So this might be a good opportunity. If any of you know her, then this would be a great chance for that justice to finally be served. So let's talk through some of the crimes. We have, of course, interference of an investigation, lying to the police, obstruction of justice, child abuse, child labor. Now we're talking about the mom here, Ellen. Child labor, contract violation, unlawful detainment, unlawful detainment of a minor without due process, improper schooling. They didn't send her to the schools. She never got her degree, or she never got her education. Trafficking, taking her across state lines. And then for the daughter, impeding an investigation, obstruction of justice, threats, coercion, financial coercion, covering up sexual abuse, covering up a predator. Wow, we got a huge list on this one, you guys. Julian Swartz. Got to think of the other names on there. I'm going to list them in the description. This is a huge case, you guys. And at some point, I would love to do follow-up on this one. I will do follow-up on this one. I would like for you guys to tweet this out, share this out, get it out, so that way maybe we could get some justice for Trisha's daughter. I pray that I see justice in my lifetime for Trisha's daughter. So with that, I'm going to close up. I will list all of these links in the description, all of the articles, all of the videos, also including my video for the new statutes and the new laws that are out. And let's get this going. Thank you, you guys. I appreciate it.